Welcome to the Got Invention Show. I'm your host, Brian Freed, and today our guest is Joe Farco. He is an intellectual property attorney, and he's also an inventor. Welcome to the show, Joe.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you for having me.
Joe, interesting guy. I've known you for a long time. Why don't you start off by telling the audience who you are and where you're from?
Sure. So my name is Joe Farco, originally born and raised in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, New York. I live out in Long Island, New York. And I practice intellectual property. I'm an engineer by trade. Also have some science degrees in pharmaceutical chemistry, and I am an inventor.
That is a serious background. With all the engineering that you've done, what did that kind of transpire into as soon as you graduated college and kind of moved through graduate school?
Well, I mean, engineering school was sort of the area where I got to hone in on my creative abilities. It was basically giving someone who has a knack for painting the paintbrushes and the palette needed to make what was coming into their mind. So engineering gave me that subset. But when I learned in my engineering degree studies that there was a way to protect your creations, I said, my gosh, that sounds really, really awesome. I want to do that for other people. And that launched me into law school, where I studied and now practice, almost 2 decades as a intellectual property and patent lawyer.
You've had a chance to see people, innovative, creative people that are coming through your doors. And now you have put the inventor cap on. From your experience of being the intellectual property, the patent attorney, what has been kind of what you've seen out there with new inventions and what the opportunity might be for innovators and creators out there?
In the patent attorney role, I've seen some really brilliant ideas, really great things that people have made. And I commend anybody who brings things to me, that the fortitude they have to pursue their dream. That's always very important. I think that was always a big thing in my life growing up. So seeing someone do that and being a part of that, working with them to help try and get that sort of protection for them it really is an honor. So I've been very blessed to be part of that, these creations that people have come up with over the years.
So you got that itch. You're like, you know what? I'm seeing all these things, watching everybody, but you know what? You have that mindset because that's what you did growing up and obviously what you went to school for. So now you took your creativity and you came up with an invention. So Joe, what was the problem that you had for this idea that we're going to show in a moment?
Sure, Brian. Well, I like the word itch that you use because mine happened to take multiple decades. So I mentioned I grew up in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. So I lived in an apartment. And it was a great decade, the 80s, when I was growing up as a young boy. And as you can imagine, there wasn't too many places to run around in the urban setting in which I found myself. So I did make great company with the toys that I had of that age. But what I had found was, and in fact, if you don't mind, I mean, for example, some of these things that I was privy to as a child, I had action figures, and I also had these bendable toys. Some people from, folks my age and our age may remember these. So you could bend them up and down. Usually had rubber on them. And of course, we had the building block, which there were several at that time that were of repute, but notably the Lego block. What happened with me is that I used to try and make all of these toys play together, and I couldn't do it. It seemed as almost like the problem existed because of the way people designed them. So people who made bendy toys didn't make them to work at action figures. And if you try using your Lego guys to fight, it'd end up like a big mess on the floor. So I was stuck with this problem, and to be honest, use the word itch. It persisted my whole life. It sat in the back of my head, and like a lot of the people that I've seen on the patent attorney side, it's just they never gave up on that dream. And I was telling myself I could make this better, but I realized that even when I was young, I had to go to engineering school to study, and then learn more about these different areas of practice. And obviously too, I sat around thinking maybe someone else will solve this, but it just never happened until now.
So you had this problem, you had this itch. I call it things that annoy me, that I invent things from. So what did you do now, Joe? So you had this issue. what did you do first? What was the kind of way to just get started? Because you've seen other people do it. Now it's your turn.
I'll call it a very educated trial and error process. I said to myself, as a child, I wanted to make my toy do whatever I wanted. In other words, I wanted it to kind of move and do whatever I desired. But I did like customization. That's where like the building blocks came to play. So I said to myself, how can I make something that can move it any way I want, but can work with a building block? So I had come up with a first prototype that sort of took that, that bendy toy I showed you, and trying to use a rubber coated bendable linkage, which was like a bendable wire, and then have it interact with building blocks was my first attempt at trying to do this.
You know what? So right now it's stiff. You only have it one way to kind of make it work. So those were your parameters. You needed it to be more flexible. You wanted your whatever it is that you were creating. And Joe, I would expect maybe you might say it's your kids that you were doing this for, but it sounds like it was for you.
It was something, but I've noticed with a lot of my clients that it wasn't a matter of whether someone else told them they wanted it. It was something that a person would come to me and say this was a problem that they saw, and they felt resolute in trying to solve, and that's kind of how it was. In fact, Brian, I actually would push back and say, kids today really don't even know. They were born under this regime where if you have an action figure, you play your action figures over there. If you have bendy toys, are almost non-existent now, and the Lego basically licenses a lot of its properties and essentially will, what their sets can do, but they're not like no one's looking for compatibilities. Everyone's staying in their lane. I want to kind of bring it all together.
Can you show us a demo, Joe? Show us how it works.
Certainly. Right now, what's out there are components like these. I put this on one of my examples here, and you could see here the pieces are familiar, and they bend and they move. But of course, like at a certain point, they can't move any which way you want. And then also just from the appearance of it, while everyone will say, hey, this looks like a cool building block toy. It's difficult to look at this and say, wow, it looks like an action figure, but this is what everybody has come to expect from building with today's building blocks. It'll look like this, segmented, jointed. I mean, do your legs have, all these little pieces in between that have these knobs in between? No, that's a function of the limitation of these pieces. If they didn't have these little knobs, they couldn't move. And you're stuck. And by the way, if you twist these the wrong way, yeah, if you bend it the wrong way, it snaps. So, a child playing rigorously with a building block, a pure building block toy, want to make an arm like this. If you go to move it, they snap apart. So the technology I have is what I call an action block or posable building block unit. You could see here these pieces are compatible with known building blocks, i.e. Lego and others. But they exist, are coupled to a posable metal wire. So what happens is, while they're both compatible, they also provide a movement and capability that was never before imagined. Now, what happens is you can take that building block I just showed you a moment ago, and you can put it onto your Connecto, like so. And really in a new building way, where you're not just building one on top of the other or connecting ball and socket joints, as the case may be, you thread these on like so. Give them a hand. And now, voila. This is called this particular toy is called Persono. Persono is a fully bendable action figure, but he's buildable from building blocks. And in addition to that, he can be maneuvered into various different poses, and he will hold those positions for you as you see fit.
Very nice.
This toy is irreproducible with known building blocks, particularly here if you want to look at the spine. It is just not capable of being done. But the Connecto provides that. And this particular Connecto building block unit, I call the links. Here's what it looks like outside of the building block system. So there's a couple of virtues of this we'll go into in a moment, but this is just one embodiment showing you how you use this particular tool to build in a way that was heretofore unimaginable and gives you a new versatility that you couldn't have before.
Congratulations, Joe. Well accomplished. So let's talk about your journey now as an inventor. So you came up with this solution to what you wanted to make as bendable, flexible type of figures. And what did you figure out? Because you have the background in the engineering, so you might have an advantage or a head start to a lot of us that maybe might not have figured that out or figured out what to do first. So was it kind of easy for you in the beginning?
No, I think for any one of us who seeks to solve a problem, the answer you find is not the final one. And I say that really as a bit of wisdom I learned along the way in my life, is that despite my knowledge, my expertise as a engineer, having studied robotics and manufacturing, you still need to ask questions. I am not a manufacturer, so you still need to get input. You need to ask questions, talk to people, seek out resources from those people who provide it. Groups like, some people like yourself, anyone who's basically has access to people that can give you further information. More information is always better than saying, yeah, I got it, let's just go forward. That decision is something I've learned from working with my clients and seeing others that I don't want to do. I think I always challenge myself to ask a question and try to find the best way. And sometimes you make mistakes. It's part of learning. There's no book for your invention, your ideas. There's no story written for that. You're the author of it. So sometimes it needs some editing.
Makes sense. Now, you as the inventor and having to file some sort of intellectual property, what did you do? Did you first work on your invention, get it to a certain point, and then protect it? Or did you protect it first? What did inventor do with the patent attorney?
Well, okay, so in my situation, sometimes, and this isn't legal advice, but sometimes you have an idea that you can file right away upon, and you go forward with it because the way to make it is probably well understood. The way in which it operates can be deduced from looking at it. So, in which case, you could file for the IP right away. I did something that was kind of old school. I actually wanted to prove to myself that I could make it and that I had a path for mass production of it first. And why is that? My particular component is different. For a lot of people, they may hear of injection mold terminology. My product is an insert mold technology. This is all disclosed in the patent, which I made sure to include, which is a good idea for anyone to do. But I want to make sure I figured out a way to do this repeatedly, because a lot of times an inventor will come to me, mention this great design, and I asked them, I said, how much is it going to cost to make that thing? And then all of a sudden, you could see in their eyes the sun turn into gloom, because they didn't think that far ahead. And myself, I wanted, my advantage was having that experience and having the background. I was able to say, okay, I knew I had to figure this out first. Because a lot of times a good idea is not always, an invention and innovation are two different things. And the innovation is what everyone wants to try and get to. But the invention is obviously a necessary component of that. But if, your product can't be made viably, it could be difficult for it to have a future. But that's not to say it can't be done. For me, I wanted to prove that to myself first. And once I proved it, then, zip, I followed right away. And, I did all the usual steps, getting filing for foreign protection and so forth.
Okay. You took care of the engineering, prototyping, getting some quotes, figuring out where you were going to be with what it's going to look like to actually commercialize your invention. And then you filed. And now you're patent pending or patented at this point?
Patent pending at the moment.
You're patent pending. You're on showing how the prototype, or it looks almost like the real thing to me. Looks like you did a very nice job with the prototype. And now, what's next for you, Joe? What are you up to?
So the next part is finalizing the parts so they are in their final incarnation. So it is true the pieces that were shown on this show are prototype material, but the next stage is to start getting the final versions made, sending them out to folks who could help to disseminate this new technology, which has been its own experience. I could talk about that at your leisure, but it's certainly for in my area, which I implore every inventor to do, is really, really know your market, and not just know it, who the customer is, know who the distributors are, know who the marketing people are, know who are the heralds of the idea. Those voices and those ears are critical to know, because you could solve a problem in quiet on an island, but no one will ever know about it. You're right. If you really want to solve the problem for the public, you got to get the public to know. And that's been a huge lesson for me to learn. So that's really been that's my next step on this. So while, certainly we're going to keep innovating, but yeah, the major part of this is getting that idea out to the masses.
You were probably at that fork in the road, or you still might be in that fork in the road, and it's a decision that many inventors are faced with. Is Farco Toy Co. and everything that you kind of put together, is this something that you're going to go all in on and manufacture and start your own business and put it out there for sale? Or are you going to work with your intellectual property and the assets that you've built and look for a potential licensing deal where you would go to a company that's already in the business, most likely a toy company? They would manufacture it for you, they would distribute it, and you would earn a royalty from it. So where are you, Joe, at that fork in the road?
But if you remember the old Looney Tunes cartoons where they have two train tracks and the cartoon character has their foot on two different moving pieces going in opposite directions on the train, they're stretched out. The cartoon character. That's kind of like what I'm doing. So if you could imagine that. But I'm certainly always open to it. What I've found is, and this may face a lot of the viewers as well, you have this great idea and you want to license it, but a company's looking at you and saying, well, what type of viability does it have? And certainly the more they have to put into getting the idea up to a certain level, it could decrease what royalty you believe you're entitled to. And sometimes there's a reality play there. I tell clients all the time, if you're not going to, if you don't have too much skin in the game, you can't ask much more from them either. It's it's kind of a give and take. But what I found from my ability to obtain resources, third-party resources, in fact, to try and do this, is that I do want to pursue it. I think that I've been able to get the manufacturing to the point where it can be done repeatably and in a way that could be financially beneficial. But I think I also have many different partnerships with folks who help me make, like, for example, the blocks that you saw that were used that Persono. One of my clients uses them. But and this is to say too, for viewers as well, tap in to as many channels as you can, as many resources that are offered. Again, like folks like you, Brian, having people meet up with people, figuring out what connections can be made. The reality of your idea is not that far off. It's just a matter of doing the legwork. So I usually tell people the amount of intellectual rigor that went into solving the problem, you have to do equal, if not more of that, to help bring it to life. And if people go in that way, if you make that type of investment, I think it helps. You at least try it out. And if, I'm not telling people waste your money. I mean, if it's really cost prohibitive, and you might learn that too, you might have to settle for licensing it because it may be just too outside of your, the financial reality that you or your family may be involved.
Speaking of connections, you were talking about I think it was about a week or so ago, you were talking about going to the toy fair. Tell us about that kind of experience when you have gone through all this, Joe, and then there's an industry trade show that you have a chance to go to. What was that experience like for you as an inventor?
For what I've been trying to do is very gratifying. Going to the toy fair, I wasn't in a big space. I was at a corner of a table, which again, colleagues that I had allowed me to take up some of that space. We had a banner, and I went all in. I was very passionate presenting it, and we got really wonderful feedback. People saw the virtues, and a lot of people thought it was like magic at some point. They didn't. and some were afraid to touch my product because they thought it was going to fall apart. But then when they moved it, or when like one of them dropped on the floor and it didn't smash, they thought that I did something, I rigged it or something. But I said it's not. That's the invention inside there. There was other things too. I mean, for example, the Persona was one embodiment. This was called Princessory. This thing was something that when I came up with the idea to solve action figures, I had never had in mind to make bendable building block jewelry. This type of thing was really, frankly, this was just something that's, kind of spur of the moment. But then when I started realizing, and I worked on this with my older son, we started seeing possibilities with Connecto that you wouldn't otherwise have right now. And that was another thing about the toy fair that really resonated with me. Folks really enjoyed the fact that I made a piece that can act as like sort of a bendable scaffold to make things look like they're floating. I mean, I have right here, this is a posed person flying in a hot air balloon. So, when you want to put that on your countertop or whatever, it does something that you can't otherwise do right now. I mean, here's just another one too. These minifigures, for example, really big staple right now in the building block community. But now you can make a scene where you have this happens to be Spider-Man. Again, this is Lego's property, Marvel and Disney. But you can make, Spider-Man shoot web. You can make him fly and hold his position in space. So I was seeing things that we can use with this technology that had not been really thought of, that I wasn't originally thinking of. So sometimes the problem you started to solve and do solve, then you figure out you can solve so many other different problems using the same thing. And it just requires a person to constantly, like I said, constantly be innovating, constantly be thinking outside the box, because it's when we stop that creative process, then you're kind of just left. And sometimes you do. And me though, I can't help it. I love doing it. It's a wonderful thing. And I enjoy seeing, and I always tell my, my clients to never stop thinking, never stop trying to push those boundaries.
That's great, Joe. Look, this show was about you, and you're constantly kind of thinking about how you have gone through not only yourself, but other people and their journeys. And look at where you are right now. You've come a long way. You're almost there. You have to make some decisions now of what you're going to do. I see that you've been working with potentially new connections and trying to find that spot of when it is that you're going to press go. So we wish you all the best, Joe. You've given a lot of words of wisdom here, but let's just get some final ones from you. So look, there's inventors that are at all different stages of their idea, listening and watching. So what is your take on when you are coming up with an idea and you're just kind of stuck, or maybe you're somewhere in between and you need to just, I don't know if you call it the finish line, but just continuing on your journey? Give us some final words of wisdom, Joe, from you.
Never settle for what the last idea was, and always consider the other possibilities. That's not to say one should equivocate, but to always be cognizant that what you originally may have thought was the goal may actually just be the beginning of another problem to be solved. And that could apply whether in both in the invention itself or the means to bring that invention to life.
Has this been an experience not only for you, Joe, but for your family?
Oh my God. Well, my family has been behind me, and it's definitely my kids. They love the fact that their dad is trying to trying to have a company. We have T-shirts and all sorts of hats that they wear around school. They love this, and I'm really proud to be a father in this day and age and show my children. First, I have a product that gets you out away from the TV screen of video games. It allows you to create. We call the Connecto the ultimate imagination machine, because it really, as I showed today, you could literally do whatever you want with it, which is what I wanted to do from the beginning, as you know. but I love being a father to give my kids a memory that I tried at something. I tried very hard, and regardless of my skill set, I never ever thought that I knew it all. I always questioned and asked for help where I knew I needed it, and I always talked to people who know something different than me. And I think that humility from just a personal perspective as well as a father, it teaches my children that, no person can go it alone, and that but together, the right community, the right people behind you with the right amount of knowledge, you really can achieve your dreams and have, something that is like, even in their young minds, like the American dream. And that to me is probably the most rewarding thing about all this.
What's your goal, Joe? When are we going to see Farco Toy Co. and all the toys and product lines that are, what's your vision?
My vision is to have this for the whole world, to have at its disposal next year. We're underway with trying to get that mass production process started, and I am just looking forward to doing it the right way. It is, I chomp at the bit sometimes, but I know, as I, again, I'd be a hypocrite if I didn't do this, but I'm taking my time. I want to make sure it's done right, because if I do it right, I can do this for a longer period and for at a better rate for the whole world. So that way I can really solve this problem that I had always been that itch for me.
Great. Show us one more time, Joe. Just hold it up to the camera there and give us just some quick info on how we can keep in touch with you, how we can keep an eye on Farco Toy Co.
Sure. So I'm going to show up one of my other products right here. This guy here is the morphing Connecto toy star speeder. He'll turn from a car to a robot and back. Any questions you may have on my products, my inventions, and even if you want to see my IP, it's all available online at www.farcotoyco.com. And you can subscribe to us, and certainly I am a patent attorney, so you can reach me at my professional address, jfarco@norris-law.com. And so, that is what I hope to leave with everybody. And I really am thankful to be on your show, Brian. I hope I can be somewhat of an inspiration, and everybody else out there who creates that I've gotten to meet over time, whether or not you're listening. You've inspired me, so I appreciate that too.
Thank you, Joe. We're keeping an eye on you. It's 2023, so 2024, let's see what you got. All right?
Will do, Brian. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Joe. Thank you for joining us. Okay, that was very interesting. Joe Farco from Farco Toy Co. Thank you, everybody, for watching and listening. If you'd like to be a guest on the Got Invention Show, very simply, go to gotinventionshow.com. Until then, we will see you very soon. Be inventive, be creative, and keep moving forward with your big ideas.